Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Moshiach Ali podcast, the daily lesson from the Tanya. So we actually begin Tanya. My dear wife, my co-host, is not with me today, and we wish her a beautiful, beautiful day. However, as I mentioned to her, it's important that we do the daily dose so everybody can be inspired on a daily basis. Now, the Tanya begins with perhaps the most important statement of the Tanya. We are in a generation, I like to say there are a lot of tourists and young people that come through Tzfat, and I say, imagine you're on a boat, and everything you could ever desire is on this boat, except for one thing, and that is directions. How would you feel? A directionless life is not a life. It's actually a living hell. I just saw a beautiful letter that the Rabbi wrote to a lady, and she was suffering from anxiety, which unfortunately is the plague of the generation today. And the Rebbe said to her, we all have an essential will. There's something called Chinese torture. What happens in Chinese torture? Unfortunately, very diabolical people came up with this. But they take a person that's in prison and perhaps tie up his feet and his legs and his hands, and he's stuck. And they just have a little faucet with a little drip, drip, drip. And so this is a torture. It's not physically painful, but emotionally it's torturous. Why? Because pain, in a large sense, is frustration. One person may be very pained over, losing $1 million. Another person never had it to begin with, so it doesn't bother him that he doesn't have $1 million. Pain is very much frustration. So what's so frustrating if a little bit of water is dripping on you? It's that you can't, you can kind of get like it's so close. It's just so easy to stop this problem. You could just put your hand on your head and yet you're stuck. You're not feeling the ability to express yourself. You're being repressed instead of expressed. And so for a Jew, in fact, for every human, but primarily and particularly for a Jew, to be happy, your inner consciousness and conscious and self has to match your outer self. If there is a dichotomy, if there is a conflict between what I believe I should be doing and what I am doing, this in fact is the greatest source of anxiety. And that's why so many people today have anxiety. Because they're living in societies. The very first law in Judaism and the whole structure of the code of Jewish law is as follows. First of all, place God before you. Remember God. As the Baal Shem Tov said that God came to a tzaddik in a dream and told him the whole Judaism is memory. Think about Judaism. We go out and we kiss the mezuzah. And we daven, shachris, mincha, marav. We pray to God 3 times a day. We do so many things to remember. We remember God created the world once a week. That was 5,783 years ago. Do we really have to remember it again? Why are we so busy with memory? And the answer is, I think particularly men, in the structure of our minds, a man's brain has more chachma. Scientifically, that's more gray matter. A woman's brain has more bina, white matter. And these are like 10 times the amount in each type of brain, which itself, even though it's ridiculous to even have to say it, obviously the main part of the human being is their mind, and nobody's going to do a mind surgery. The male-female mind is different. And so therefore, the point is that this essential core self, who you really are, that person is the person, if you want to call it your ideals, your value system. And that can even be more than you yourself realize, because your value system is intrinsic. There's a basic sense of morality in all people, and you come with that from God. Your soul is part of God, and God is moral, God is good, God is kind, and that's your essential self. The second law in Jewish law is don't worry about people that will mock you. And this is what happens in society. It's very, very interesting. If you just understand this, you pretty much almost understand everything. There is an inner and an outer dimension. Every single thing that exists has an inner and an outer dimension. We call it a body and a soul. Our sages teach us that God, too, so to say, even though he really is only the inner, has kind of a body, an outer dimension. The whole universe is like his outer dimension, his expression. Himself, there is no body, there's no form. The same thing is with us. You don't have a body. You are a spirit. The spirit is what you believe, what you love. You could take that a person goes to heaven and many near-death experiences. They take their consciousness with them. All the things they believe, they don't take the body with them, but they take the consciousness with them. Even in a dream, your body's kind of lying down. So unfortunately, you know people in a coma. But yet, the spirit, the person is totally there. So the soul is not the body. And yet, the soul is sent into a body because the body is the one in which we do our work. So the point is, and if you just understand this point, you can almost understand everything, which is there is the inner and there's the outer. The inner creates the outer. There was a Russian Jewish scientist that he became a believer in God. And one of the things that he wrote was, we know that the inside creates the outside for the simple reason is, if you look at a plane, you're seeing the outside. So you say, oh, wow, there's this plane. But obviously there was an inner will to make the plane. There was a thought process that went into making the plane. The more complex something is, the more obviously there's a thought process. And that's really what Abraham discovered, that there has to be a supermind which creates everything, because the more science we know, the more we realize that everything's more and more complex. And in fact, it's gotten to the stage, now we know everything is a miracle. It's not only complex, it's literally a miracle. I heard this from Dr. Paul Wildman. He has 3 PhDs. He heads all the studies of the universities of Switzerland, and his board sent him around the world to find all the greatest, latest discoveries. And he came back, and his lecture was the limit of human intelligence, because in every field, for example, I'll give you 2 examples. DNA. We know, this is just DNA. The body, at least, is just DNA. And DNA is just the cell splitting. So what does that teach you? That teaches you that there's got to be a super mind that made that happen. Now, how does it split? A DNA is basically, imagine 5,000 books. This is a tiny pamphlet, 5,000 books. That's how much information is in a single cell of DNA. Now imagine you cut the book in half, and then half of the book is written automatically. And this is happening every second. Since I spoke to you, maybe hundreds of millions of red blood cells came in and out of existence. So this whole thing is like this giant miracle. And even atoms, we thought an atom in Greek means the smallest indivisible part, but it's not like that, because atoms are made out of quarks and protons and neutrons and electrons, and they're popping in and out of existence. So really it's all just miracle. Now, if it's a miracle, it changes the story, right? If a guy makes a plane, he made the plane for a reason. It's a transport system. Maybe the reason he wants it is for himself. Maybe he wants to make money, whatever it is, but there's a reason it was made. Your body, who we identify with the body, we see ourselves as this. If I say point to yourself, you'll point to your body. Your body is made for a reason. You're not here for no reason. And this is a fundamental thing. Unfortunately, what happens in societies, and I think we mentioned this the other day, the Chovos HaLevavos, from the duties of the heart, he says that so sometimes the instincts take over, because the body has certain instincts, whether it's a sexual drive or a drive for honor, whatever it may be, which often is ironically comes from a sense of shame, which shouldn't be there. But be that as it may, these drives take over the person. And instead of the person being a rational person thinking, okay, where am I going? So it's like this person on the ship. Instead of thinking, okay, what are we doing on the ship? And where are we heading to? They're just so busy, whether it's a sexual predilection or whether it's like trying to be honorable in front of other people, whatever it is, they're so busy that they're not even thinking, where are we going? What's the purpose of this whole thing? And that's where getting to the essence, getting to the soul, getting to the spirit matters. And the first step to understanding that you have a purpose is understanding that you are not your body. You have a soul. We have a lot of near-death experiences. The soul, I've actually heard this from people, that their souls went out and they were able to see their body. And again, the whole consciousness is there. Even in a dream, it's a little bit like that. And so I want to conclude with this simple, important teaching, which is the Tanya begins with a quote from the Talmud. And it says, Mashpi'in oisek. Your soul begins in heaven. We know Abraham was one of the greatest Kabbalists. Now, Abraham, he actually wrote a book called Sefer Yetzirah, amazing book, 32 short paragraphs. And Sefer Yetzirah is built on a word called Oshan, Olam Shana Nefesh, which means time, space, soul. So way before, the theory of relativity, Judaism knew that time and space are interrelated. But what science cannot speak about, because it can't define it, and that is a soul, that is a spirit. And it's obvious that we're all spirits, because if we weren't spirits, we wouldn't be alive. And it's obvious that we have emotions, it's obvious that we have intelligence, and that's obviously the main us. If you took away your life and your emotions and your intelligence, your body in a couple days would kind of disintegrate. So who are you? Are you your soul, or are you your body? And when your soul is in heaven, because there are 4 spiritual universes above us, we're born in the highest spiritual universe. Literally our soul, as we'll soon learn more about, is a spark, a part of God. But then it kind of descends into these other universes to create its own identity. Like a child being born, he doesn't realize that he's really literally the DNA of the parents. He sees himself as an individual. And this allows the person to have free choice. And the bottom line is that when the soul is in a heaven before it comes to earth, it's a great gift. It has a mission in this world, and it knows that this is the purpose of life, to come to this world and to fulfill its purpose and mission. And they are told, Mashbi'in, they make the soul swear, you swore this oath to hate tzaddik, be a tzaddik. And a lot of Tanya will define what is a tzaddik. But in the simple words, is be righteous, be good. V'al tehei rasha, don't be evil. And of course, the Torah tells us what is the definition of good and bad. You know, some people think there's a contradiction between science and Judaism. Einstein himself, one of the greatest scientists, said that basically science is amoral. It doesn't have a moral premise. Science is telling you when water bubbles, but it doesn't tell you if you should bubble the water. It doesn't tell you what to do with the water. The moral choices are what God gives us. The direction of God is life itself, having the direction of the ship, knowing where you're going. And when you know where you're going, you feel good because you have purpose. And now you can see how purpose is more important than anything. Because if you had a little boat, you had half the amenities or a tenth of the amenities, but you had a direction. You knew you were going to, your friends, in China, and you're going to meet them, you're going to be happy with them, wherever it is, you would feel elated with the trip. So the point is that where you're going and what you're doing is much, much more valuable than what you have. And that's the soul, that's the spirit. So you have to know that you were sent into this world by God himself, and you were given an oath, and this oath, you said, I will be good. I won't get distracted. I won't fear anyone that has comments to say because they're not their own identity issues, or they're afraid of, think about what happened in Germany. Normal people became mass murderers because they were too afraid to stand out. And the bottom line is we're going to stand out. To be a Jew, to be like Abraham, is say, Ivri, I'm the other side. I do what I believe is true, what my conscience tells me, what God tells me. I don't just follow the herd off the cliff. And in conclusion, we don't have an ego from that. You're not like, oh, I'm so righteous, I'm greater than you. It says, look at yourself, Karasha, which the whole time it discusses, but basically the punchline is, see yourself as if you are not righteous. See yourself as if you're one step away from evil. So each one of us has what's called a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara, a good angel and a bad angel encouraging us for the good and the bad. And we literally are one step away from evil, because everybody that was good, nobody started off evil. And so therefore a person has to be super, super on task to know that this world, like the Rambam says, like the whole world, like you have one side all the good and one side all the bad, and the next thing I do will bring the goodness will outweigh the bad. And when I know that, and my consciousness is, and this is also part of the problem with some philosophies, they say, oh, we're right, they're wrong. So you don't have an ability to change. You can't even reflect. You can't even see yourself because you're taking a premise that you're right. Every night a person should be looking at their actions, because when you're in the heat of the moment, you can't see yourself. But think, was I good? Was I not good? Did I do good? And so last but not least, I want to encourage you, support our podcast. We'll put a link below, and look at the books that I have on Tanya, really good summaries, meditations for the Tanya, the English Tanya. It really goes through the whole Tanya, breaks it up very nicely. So please enjoy. The Tanya is one of the greatest books, and subscribe. Come back for more. Come back. Please, God, with God's help, we'll do a daily video. You're welcome to reach out to me. I guess I should put a link to my website as well. You can contact me. I'm happy to answer your questions. Many blessings.